Welcome to this week's episode of Trista's Plate Story podcast. I'm Trista Polo from iwokeupawesome.com, and I am your host. Each week we learn the story behind that vanity plate. You know, the one you saw driving down the road? What did it say? What did it mean? Why did they choose it? This week we meet Brennan Tolman from Salt Lake City, Utah. We recorded this episode while Brennan was in Taiwan, which is not surprising since he and his wife spend about half their time traveling. This is possible because at the age of 25, Brennan has a fully passive online business. We talk about Brennan's plate story, which is pivotal to his story of success. We also chat about his business and the struggles he faced while growing it. So without further ado, let's go meet Brennan. Welcome to Trista's Plate Story podcast. I am so excited to have Brennan Tolman with me today. He is from Utah, but he's coming to this interview by way of Taiwan. So excited to have you, Brennan. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. This is awesome. I
Yay!
love your podcast.
Yay! I love you. I'm just going to call myself out right now. This is our second try at this. We had done an amazing interview from the comfort of Brennan's home. And through the power of technology, we're redoing it.
from like 6,000 miles away in Asia.
Yes.
So here we go.
Okay. So now your plate is ZERMATT, ZERMATT.
Yep.
Tell us the plate story.
So ZERMATT is it's actually a small town in Switzerland. And it's a town at the base of the Matterhorn. So if you've been to Disney, you know the Matterhorn, right? It's just that big, really craggy looking mountain with the cool peak. And so the reason why I chose that as my plate, why it was special to me. So I'm an entrepreneur. I've been trying for years, 7-8 years to build a company. I've been reading all the books, right? All growing up, passive income, get to that point in your life where you have your passive income, you can do what you want, you can travel, give yourself that time freedom, make your dreams come true kind of a thing. And so I've been reading all those all growing up, and a little funny backstory. So I'm the middle of 5 siblings. And when I was 11, my parents were going on a Europe trip and they took my 2 older siblings, and the cutoff was 12. And I was so upset because I was like 1 year away from being able to go to Europe. So my whole life, all growing up, I was like, I want to go to Europe. Like I saw their photos, they got to go to the Eiffel Tower. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Europe. And so when I became an entrepreneur in college, that was like my goal. I was like, I'm going to build this company to the point where I can leave to Europe, not worry about the company, and just enjoy it. And so I'm a huge Disney nerd. So is my wife. And we go all the time. We see the Matterhorn, like in Disney. And I'm like one day I looked at her and I was like, I want to go to the real one. It's got to be somewhere in Europe, right? And so at the very beginning of our entrepreneurial adventure, on our honeymoon, actually, we saw the Matterhorn, made that decision. And then we've worked for a couple of years to build a company. And I'm a wedding videographer by trade. I mean, I started shooting weddings in college to make some money and to pay for my college. And eventually I realized, and we'll go into this more later, but I realized that I could run advertisements on Facebook and Instagram and Google and online ads to basically book myself more jobs. So I started shooting more jobs myself. And then I ended up booking other people jobs and training them how to shoot it the Brennan way. So I didn't have to show up anymore. And then
That's awesome.
It just kept getting crazier from there.
So how old were you when that happened? So you're like, are you still in college at this point when you realize there's a Brennan way you could train people on?
Yeah, so it's 21.
That's awesome.
21.
Wow.
And I was in college. So it was kind of hard. I was balancing being in college, building this company. And so all the pain, trying to figure this out. I hired some people that weren't good. I tried to train them and they just were bad photographers. And I had to get screamed at by moms on the phone. I'm like this 22-year-old kid getting screamed at by a mom, ruining people's special day and stuff, which I felt horrible about. But that's part of the process, right? Like that's what I had to be willing to do to build a company. And every time a photographer made a mistake and didn't shoot it the Brennan way, I was able to go add more training so the next photographer would never make that mistake. So that was like the real journey, was like figuring out how I can farm these weddings out to contractors. And so I spent those few years in college building a system, figuring out how Brennan can be the owner of the business, not the videographer, not the manager. How can I train my manager? So I started as a videographer, right? And then I became the manager of a couple of videographers. And then I stepped out and became an owner of a business. And I hired a manager to recruit and deal with those contractors. So that's what I spent years, those crucial college years, figuring out. And it was brutal. I was getting yelled at all the time. I was making mistakes all the time. But every time I made a mistake, my philosophy was the mistake is a good thing because it shows us the leaks. It shows us the holes in the ship. And so my job was to patch the ship. And some days it felt like, the ship was just,
sinking,
full of water and sinking. And it was like, we had 15 problems, at a time. And it was like, is this even worth it? Weddings are so high energy, high emotion for everybody. And if it's good, that's a good thing. If it's not, it's a bad thing. And so there were times when it was like, we just felt like we were the worst people on the planet, and seriously,
I have to say that what you're pointing to is really important. First of all, you have like a bunch of 40 and 50-year-old trying to get started as an online entrepreneur, super jealous that you started in your 20s and that you're clearly still fairly young and traveling the world, because you guys actually spend about 50% of your time traveling at this point, as I understand it. Yeah. But you really took on the concept of fail your way forward. A lot of people avoid failure. They avoid it at all costs because they hate that feeling of I disappointed someone. And so that's a huge concept. And I really wanted to underline that. I want to go back to the ZERMATT trip, because you guys went to ZERMATT, like you stood there at this place that you'd only ever dreamed of from being 11 years old, wanting to go to Europe your whole life. Yeah. So how was it actually being in the real one?
Yeah. So basically the way this all connects is finally we got the business to the point where I was an owner, and it was still only in Utah, but I was like, the first thing that I want to do to celebrate is I want to go on this Europe trip. So we did this epic 10-day Europe road trip. And the main stop, the main goal was to go to ZERMATT and stand at the base of the Matterhorn. And we did. And it was unbelievable. We drove a car through the Alps and on the tiny Europe, highways through mountains, which was super scary. But when we finally got there, we had to go up through a mountain elevator, whatever that is, to get to the top of a mountain so you could see the Matterhorn. And we exited the elevator and it was like a movie moment, boom, there's the Matterhorn right there. And up until that, I had just been feeling so defeated and depressed. Even though we were making money, I just felt defeated because of the massive amount of mistakes. And so seeing the Matterhorn, standing with my wife, I was like, I was 23 and I was like, okay, this is worth it. This is the why. This, sitting here, I never thought that I would come to the Matterhorn.
Totally worth it.
And I never thought it would be this young at 23. And that was kind of the moment for me when I said, this is my why. This is why I've been going through the failures. Because moments like this, where you're I guess I'm not trying to brag here, but other college kids are at home reading their textbooks and I'm standing here in front of the Matterhorn, but I also have been wrecking myself emotionally and mentally the last 3-4 years in a way that nobody has any desire to, so I've been paying this heavy price and now I'm starting to actually see the fruits. And so that was the moment for me, standing in ZERMATT, looking at the Matterhorn, realizing that this was the beginning, right? It gave me that extra juice that I needed to get to the crucial next step, which we'll talk about in a minute. But, we had created a successful business in Utah and there was just this graveyard of mistakes under us. And looking at the Matterhorn for that moment, I was like, this is why it's worth it. This is why I need to keep going, because this was such an unbelievable experience. I need to have more. There are more out there.
That's amazing. And I actually felt it in my body when you said that it opened up and you walked out. You clearly have that as a memory so real for you that I felt it right now, however many years later. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because your why has to stay alive for it to really move you. I want to ask you, boy, you went through a lot. How did you not quit? Most people would have quit, Most people would have given up. Love to hear what it was that had you continue.
Yeah, that is the question, huh? I think for me, it was like I understand, I guess, myself and the way that I need to operate. And I've known that from a very like early age. So the way that I operate is this. I will have like a month of just nonstop work, 50, 60 hours, just emotional pain and dealing with all the problems. And it's like it never ends. And then I'll take what I call it a burnout week. And so it's usually about 7 to 10 days and I do nothing. And I either travel and I just get away and I tell people I'm unavailable, regardless of the problems that happen, or I sit in my basement and I, watch movies, play video games, like whatever, like, and so that was the only thing that kept me going, was being able to turn off and take a burnout week. And, whenever I needed it. And my amazing wife, understood that as well and would encourage me to take burnout weeks when I needed to. And so that, as we, started making more money, I mean, and that's another, I think, big reason, and I'll just be totally honest, is money, right? I mean, you make more money. Like it's like the more money you make, the more problems you have. That's how business works. That until you get to a certain point where you can hire somebody else to take all the problems for you. But like I personally was making like more money than anybody in my family at that point, and so that was motivating. I mean, it was like I can, it was this double-edged sword of like, I've got the money to be able to go to Europe and at 23 and do all these crazy things, but it's a nightmare when I'm home. But it doesn't. But I knew that I had an exit plan, and so I think that was part of it too. Is I was like, we have an exit plan. Like at some point, the money's going to be there, and the problems are not, because there's only so many holes that can be in the ship. So for me, it was just taking time. Like, hey, Gary Vee's great. I completely disagree with the whole grind, like never stop. Like you need to work 50 hours and then die. Like for me, it was like I had to take my little nuggets of rewards along the path. And I don't feel like it slowed me down, like now I'm at that passive income point and I'm only 25, but I feel like it made it possible, because I would have quit if I hadn't taken breaks and completely walked away.
Well, you're absolutely right, because if you burn out to the point where you just can't go another minute and you haven't gotten to successful passive income in your case yet, then there's nowhere else to go. You're out of juice. That self-care piece cannot be ignored, will not be ignored.
Sure, absolutely.
So let's wake up from the nightmare.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, let's see. What are the fruits of all of that work? You now have a passive income. Is it 100% passive?
Yep, 100%.
All right, well, let's hear about that. Tell us about your passive income.
You got it.
And what you were able to create with all that effort, and what made it worth it now.
Sure. So after we got back from Europe, I had one of my business partners call me. He said, I have an idea. You have built an amazing wedding company in Utah. You have created proprietary training, logos. You have hundreds of thousands of images that Tolman Media has taken. I mean, and content is king. And so you have all these images that are ready to be used for marketing. You have proven ads that you spend $30 in ads and you get a new lead every time, and you can close 1 in 3. So you can spend $90 to get a $2,000 job every time. Because I had years worth of perfect math. He's like, you've done this. You not only know how to book the job with the bride, you know how to fulfill the job. And he was like, you should take this company and license it. And I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, it's basically franchising, but not nearly as strict. You have a great thing. You have a great system. Another entrepreneur like in Minnesota who wants to bring Tolman Media to Minnesota can buy a license to become Tolman Media Minnesota. And with that comes access to the software that I built, access to our entire portfolio, so they can immediately start running ads. And when their brides in Minnesota say, can you show me your portfolio? They have hundreds of thousands of images to show to the bride there. And so they literally don't even need to have ever shot a wedding to start making money.
Wow.
Training for a manager, for a salesperson, training for their contractors. And so literally the owner of the business who told me, Minnesota, like they just need to hire a salesperson and a manager. and then put them through our training, and then suddenly they own a passive business already, right? Like I can tell them if they bought our license, they could be where I was at pretty much right away because we figured it all out. And so I said, that's great. I don't think it'll ever work. Who's going to buy it? And I was hesitant, right? Because I had seen the graveyard, right? Like I knew how hard it was to get here. I knew that me getting screamed at by brides was the worst, and I didn't want anybody else to ever have to go through that. And he's like, you don't understand. That's why they want to buy this, because you have gone through that. And suddenly I was like, oh, this is why I've been patching the ship. I didn't know, but this is why. So what we did is we started licensing out pretty much states or major cities to entrepreneurs. And we sold our first one in San Diego and then in Nevada, and they started making money in the first week. And then they would start to refer their friends and say, hey, you should go buy Toll Media Boston. And so then their friend would buy it. And then their uncle would buy it. They'd be sitting down at family dinner. And so we started like rapid fire selling all of our licenses to all these entrepreneurs. We sold out of the United States in 3 months. Like we got to the point where like suddenly it was a Utah company, and 3 months later we were like across in every single state except for Alaska.
Wow.
And I'm not sure about the Eskimo wedding traditions, but we're not there just yet. And so and then we had people come to us and say, I want to buy, UK. I want to buy, and so then we expanded to now we've sold all of Canada. We are in all of the UK. We're in, I think, Romania now, and so we've got Spain. And so it's crazy because it was like almost overnight. All the work that I had done, all that pain, compounded. It was like we turned on this one switch, and suddenly everybody was making money. And basically I figured out how to make money and fulfill weddings, and I was smart enough to document it, right? And to when I patched a hole, it wasn't just like a phone call saying, hey, do this next time. It was like I had a handbook, and I would write down the new procedure, right? Standard operating procedure. Or if it was a problem with training, I would go shoot another training video and then roll it out to all of the contractors and then follow up to make sure that they didn't make that same mistake. And so I had actually taken action every time we made a mistake instead of just letting it roll over me, right? And so basically now, suddenly it's, we've got this international business, and, and I'm the owner of it, right? And so I still own Utah, like I always have, but now I also own an international company that pays royalties to the business, not me, right, every week. And so as they go out and sell their packages in Boston and whatnot, they'll pay a royalty every week. And so now it's crazy because I think everyone's journey is different. I would have never imagined this was the way that we became passive, but now it's regardless of whether I work or not, they are out there making money, and so they're paying royalties. And the coolest part for me is they have to make money for me to make money, so it has to be valuable. They have to make, a lot of money for us to make a tiny bit of money, which is great for them. And then we hired, like I said, I was 24 at the time, and I was like, I don't know how to run an international company. So we hired a president in his 30s or 40s, like an actual, like a real adult. and he's
like
awesome.
A real person.
Yeah, like a real person knows what he's doing. And now he runs the business, so he's the president of Toll Media, and he runs the business, and he's phenomenal, and he's been great at growing it. And so now I'll do a weekly meeting with him, over Zoom from wherever I am, and he'll give me the update on the company, and I will provide some, high level, I've done this for years. He's not a wedding guy. I've done weddings forever on every level. And so I will give him some, feedback and direction, but I kind of will steer the ship occasionally, but he's the guy, man. And I have delegated all of everything to him. I trust him. And so now it's starting over again, saying, well, what do I want to do? I'm 25, I don't have any kids yet. And so, what do you do now? And that's a whole other conversation, but it's been super interesting to say, where do you go from here? And right when we got passive is when COVID hit, and I had 6 or 7 businesses that we had launched right before COVID, literally 5 days before all the domino lockdowns. And so, that was hard. It's it was kind of discouraging when I was trying to move on to like the next thing. I was like, I don't want to be like a Carly Rae Jepsen one hit wonder kind of a guy. And so I was like, I want to like, I want to try to like make another business and prove that I can be a serial entrepreneur. But with COVID, it was like just nobody had money back in March, April. It was, well, if they had money, they didn't want to spend it, right? And so now I'm like, I've been trying to figure it out this year, like what's the next step for me, is how do I be fulfilled still? And how do I use what I have to still create value for people? You know what I mean? In a COVID kind of devastated world.
Yeah. And I want to delve into that, but I want to underline something you said before. You
Sure.
had no idea where this was going to go. When you were building your business originally, going through all the heartache and headache, you didn't know what it was going to look like at the end.
Totally.
You were just really wanting to succeed. You were unwilling to give up, and you were doing everything that you knew to do. And that's where the jackpot is.
Totally.
Right? The continued commitment.
I'll be honest, when I started 20 was when I really started, like, I had no idea. Like, I knew that I wanted to be successful. Like I knew that I could do it. I had no doubt that I could be successful. I didn't know which road was mine, if that makes sense. I know that I can work hard enough, and I will work hard enough because I've grown up working really hard. I don't expect anything. I don't expect anything from the world. I don't expect anything from anybody. Like, I know that I can make something happen. I just need to figure out what it is. And so I tried making event videos, and I did so much free work when I was 20. I mean, so much free work. I hated weddings, man. I tried to never do weddings because they were a nightmare. But I was good at it. And so I tried every other possible form of video that I could do and photo, but I mean, headshots, like everything. And I thought I was going to have a big break. I was convinced that it was good. I was going to have like a day where like somebody called me and said, I'd like to pay you $15,000 to come shoot a video. Like that is what I thought was going to happen. And I learned that it is really just the compound effect every day.
And
totally.
I would assert what you're saying, I think, is it's way better than you ever could have imagined it turning out.
Yes, 100%.
Right? Like if you had made a vision like this is what it has to look like, you would never have come up with something this huge, this passive, this successful.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I'm not even gonna like try to like lie, like I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs, they kind of have that hindsight bias where they're like, here's why I did everything.
Yeah.
I had this, like, here's the 10 steps that I did that made me successful. And like, the truth is about entrepreneurship, you are flying by the seat of your pants.
Making it up as you go along.
Yes. Every day you're just like, you have absolutely no idea. And so like, I'm like I have people and they're like, wow, like that's such a good idea. Like, where did you come up with it? And I'm like, I didn't. Like I booked brides and I didn't have somebody to take their date. And so then I panicked and had to go hire a new videographer, and then I was like, crap, he doesn't know what he's doing. So I had to go create a training program so that he could do it. Like, I was impulsive and I took somebody's money that I shouldn't have. AKA, I was flying by the seat of my pants,
Yeah.
But I think that was the number one thing is I was like I had a lot of friends who were like, why are you selling weddings for November 12th? We're booked. We don't have any other person. And I'm like, if somebody wants to hand me money, I'm going to take it now and figure it out later because it's March. And so then I think that was the difference between, like, that was it. It's like, I chased it and I never said no to a dollar ever. And so I would take the money, and everybody on my team thought I was an idiot because they had to deal with the problems because they were like, what? And then I would be like, we just need to recruit more. And they were like, you just need to stop taking money. I'm like, I'm not going to stop taking money. Like, we're making money. And I think that's where most businesses like flatline is like, like, can you imagine you go to a McDonald's at like 6 p.m. and they're like, sorry, we're out of burgers for the day. Like, that would never happen. But that happens all the time at like, Bob's Burger Joint. And that's why Bob's Burger Joint is Bob's Burger Joint and McDonald's is McDonald's, because there's this unquenchable, I mean, that's 24-hour McDonald's, like they want your money so bad. They'll sell you a hamburger at 4 a.m. And that is the difference, is you have to be willing to take money now and figure it out later. And it's risky. It's one of the most risky things an entrepreneur can do. But that right there is I think one of the key differences.
I love that. There's so much good juice in this conversation. You should do a TED Talk for sure. I'm positive about that. I want to talk about your travel. How much of the world have you seen so far? What's next?
Sure. Yeah, so we've been to most of the states in America, and then I actually lived in Taiwan for 2 years when I was 18, and and then my wife is from Taiwan. I met her in Utah, and it was kind of this perfect, like, I spoke that language, and she's, we both spoke English and Chinese, and had such fitting personalities, and so I've spent about a tenth of my life in Taiwan at this point, and spent about 2.5 years. I'm 25. So I've been to China. We've been to Europe, on that big road trip. So Germany, Switzerland. We went to London in January, but that's about it. We had to wait quite a bit to go internationally because of our green card, So we actually only were able to start going on trips last June in 2019. And so we were like, we just started booking trips like crazy. And so we went on, Taiwan and Europe and all that stuff. And then COVID hit, and so with Taiwan right now, I was just going nuts, I was just going nuts in Utah, and there was nothing, like, I had worked myself out of a job. And so now I had nothing that made me feel fulfilled. Like I was not needed. And that was really hard for me. Is I was like, I spent years building this company, and suddenly I was not necessary anymore. And I'm like, well, that's great. Like, money's great, but like, what am I supposed to do all day? And that was really hard. Like like anything that I wanted to do, I couldn't. And I tried to start 6 new businesses, and they just wouldn't take off because it's just the wrong time, And so, like, for me, I was like, I got to do something. Like, I gotta like feel, like I gotta use my skills. I gotta grow. And so, my Chinese was getting a little bit rusty. And so my wife and I said, all right, like, what if we just went to Taiwan for a couple months? Like, there's no COVID here at all. They had 500 cases total ever since it started. And then they tapered off because it's an island. And so they locked off the island from visitors unless you had a negative test within 3 days of getting on the plane, and then a 2-week quarantine, which you get here. They text you every day. And if you are sick, they take you to the hospital. They have universal health care. They take care of you for free, and then you're free to go. And so it's a heavy price to come here, but that's why they contained it so well. And so there's no cases. And so I ended up getting a business visa to come here. I wrote them and I said, I'm interested in expanding potentially Tolman Media International to Taiwan. And I would love to come and check it out, which is all true. I really wanted to. And so I got granted a business visa, which allowed me to enter. My wife is a citizen, which allowed her to enter. And so since being here, it's just been fulfilling because I kind of had a realization while I was here where I said, this world is like, travel is so important. Travel matters for everybody. I mean, for the people that need to go on a trip, who work their butts off all day long, it's important for them to travel and get some new perspectives. It's important for all local economies. Travel matters for everybody, for countries that collect those taxes. Like, it's not just fun. I mean, there's a lot more. Like, when we travel, sure, it's fun, but it's not like roller coaster fun. It's like, I love to learn, and so it's fascinating. Like, today we saw a dude brushing his teeth with a hose, and I was like, I've never seen that before. And it's like, it's like you learn about different cultures and what they do, and it makes you appreciate, what you have, but it also makes you appreciate what others have. Like, I was super against universal healthcare because I grew up very, very conservative until I came to Taiwan and realized how phenomenal it is. And so just things like that, it changes your opinion, it opens your eyes to different things, and it makes you more moldable. And so while I was here, I started using my video skills because I've always just been a videographer. And I started filming Taiwan, and I started creating, like, my goal was, I want to make like a travel guidebook, like you could buy at a store, but in a sexy video version. And I'm going to highlight local businesses, and I'm going to include the way that people can book with them in the description. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's kind of like the last few days, like what I've been thinking is I was like I made this awesome video for Taiwan. I'm paying my own money to boost this YouTube video on my channel. And so I'm hoping that people watch this and they look at the different businesses and experiences and they pick one and they book, and it helps boost the local economy. And so like, as of right now, I'm like, it fills me with purpose to be able to use my video skills to like benefit the traveler, because they can watch a video and say, oh, that's fat. Like, look, honey, like we want to go to Taiwan. Here's 20 different experiences with the address and the link on how to book in the description. I'm not collecting any money. And it helps them to visualize where they're actually going. That's my new idea, is like how I can be helpful and contribute and create value, because like I had a few months during COVID, like in between actually when we did the interview and right now, where I seriously got super depressed, because like I have learned that like money doesn't really matter. What matters is feeling like you belong and that you're contributing. And that was like one of the greatest lessons I think horrible years taught me, is like, it really doesn't matter how many zeros are in your bank account. Like, if you don't feel like you belong anywhere and nobody needs you, then that's really sad. And so I think like that's kind of my quest now, is like I am trying to figure out ways that I can, hopefully I'll start a new business when the time is right economically. But in the meantime, like this has been really cool, and I'm hoping I can reach out to departments of, tourism in other countries and say, let me show you what I did for Taiwan. And, my company told me the International is doing a give back program called Travel Matters, and we want to come here and highlight local businesses, and I don't expect to be paid, so we'll see. I mean, I have no idea. It's just kind of one of those shower thoughts, but that's where I'm at now. It's like it's
awesome.
It's weird. Like whenever I tell people that, like some people are like, oh, how hard is it to be you and have to figure out like what you want to do with your free time. And I'm like, well, yeah, like, and I understand that perspective, but it's like, I was always told this in college, if you work harder than anyone else is willing right now, then you will be able to live like nobody else can later, something like that. And so I just held true to that, and I tried, and that's kind of where I feel like I'm on now. So, I mean, yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah. And you are so right. Money is just a scorecard. It's just a scorecard. And if you don't have a way to participate in society where you feel like you're actually making a difference, it gets pretty old pretty quick just to be filthy rich and have plenty of money and nothing to do with your time. And I mean, not that I've had that experience, but I can imagine. I mean, I think because I'm working in a residual income environment, that's my business. And I definitely have a good amount of residual income. It's not enough to retire, never work again. I'm still building it, but I'll tell you that if I wasn't doing anything, I'd get pretty bored pretty quickly. I'm sort of like, I have workaholism. I get it from both sides of my family. But I love what you're saying about travel, because it is super important and it's super crucial to the whole economy, to the spirit, the mind. I have sort of blasé attitude about travel that I realized recently came from something that happened in my childhood. You were so anxious to get to Europe because of something that happened in your childhood. I couldn't give a crap about travel because of something that happened in my childhood. So I'm working through that, because I know it means I don't get to experience like what you're saying with the guy brushing his teeth with a hose. That's never going to happen to me. And experiences like it, where I get to see the world from a completely different and unique perspective from mine. So that's really, really interesting and really important.
I also think though that like, there's like, I think it's important to make the distinction between, tourism and travel. I think you can go to the same place, like the tourist and the traveler can go to the same place and have completely different experiences. And I think that you can have travel experiences in a city 2 hours away. You don't have to go across the ocean, right? Like one time, a couple months ago, my wife and I went to Louisiana just because, like, why not? And I'm a big Saints fan. And so we went to Louisiana, New Orleans during COVID, which was fascinating to see that state and how it was affected. And we stopped on the side of the road at a Waffle House. and which we don't have in Utah. And I was like, what is Waffle House? And it's like run by one or two people. And so we were eating our waffles, and it was a young, black guy behind the counter, and he was the nicest guy I've ever met. And by the way, Utah's like incredibly white. Like there's like no diversity in Utah. So I don't see it very often. So that's very different. And it's important to be able to see and connect with different people, right? And so anyways, we're talking to this guy, and we just got to be pretty good friends. And he was like telling us that, he had just gotten out of prison, who's my age, for 3 years for a mistake he made when he was young, which all of us make. So everyone else during COVID had been basically trying to only work, 6-7 hours a week so they could get their unemployment checks. He was picking up everybody's shifts. This kid was working, I kid you not, 21 hours a day.
Oh my gosh.
And he was my age, and he was very proud. He's like, but I'm so proud because I have worked so hard. I'm trying to rebuild my life. Waffle House gave me a chance, and I finally was able to buy my own car. And he pointed outside, and it was like this rundown, beat up car. And he was so proud of that car and had worked his butt off literally 21 hours a day so that he could get a car. And my parents sold me a car, when I was 16, right? I mean, like I didn't even ever have to think about that. And I was like so deeply touched, like when you grow up in Utah, you hear about all the white privilege and Black Lives Matter and stuff, and you kind of like dismiss it because you're not around it. You don't know. You have no idea. And like my wife and I like went back to the hotel room and like wept for like an hour because it was like this eye-opening experience to be like, oh my gosh, like we are so lucky and we're privileged. Like that's the thing. Like, and I would have never known that. And it was so eye-opening. Like one of the most deeply touching experiences that I ever had was at a Waffle House. And that's like such a weird sentence, but so I think like you can have travel experiences anywhere. And that's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be international. You just have to be looking for it, I guess.
Well, I'm glad you said that. That is such an important distinction. You travel like my aunt and uncle travel. You can have experiences in the next town over, the next state over. And I'm very moved by that story about the Waffle House guy as well.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Like you just don't know what other people go through.
Yeah. And I think the same thing here. Like when I was 18 and I was living in Taiwan, one day I was walking through, it's like a port town, and it was very run down. And so I'm like walking through these alleyways, just kind of whatever. And I stumbled into this old dingy factory, and there was people in there who were leathery skin. I mean, these guys had worked their entire life, like physical manual labor, and they were making door hinges with these big metal machines. They were like, and they were like, I mean, they were making these door hinges, like, and I started talking to them, and they worked 15-hour days. They made like $1 an hour US. And I was like, and they had been doing this, I think that one of them had been doing it for 40 years. He was 60. And I was like that was the first moment that I had where I was like, people live like this, so we can open our doors. Every time I open a door now, I think about that. I think about that factory. And so I think that like I have definitely changed. And it's kind of made me realize, like, at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to fix anything has nothing to do with politics and everything to do with empathy. And our ability to get outside of ourselves and actually like be willing to listen. So I think it's important to travel and to have not just tourism. Like I actually, besides like Disneyland, I get bored on roller coasters. I get bored doing the tourist stuff. Like I enjoy to go find the, kind of the local flavor or whatever, and mostly just talk to the people. And that's what I think is cool about Airbnb is you can live like a local, like, and then you can also, like, one of my favorite things, it's kind of on hold now, but it's Airbnb experiences. One time I got my chakra red on Venice Beach in California. I don't even know what that is. And they took a chakra photo of me with all the colors, and then they told me what, all about it. And it was awesome, and I made chocolates in London with some lady who is a professional chocolatier, and it's cheap, So I think like my favorite thing is, when I go to somewhere, I open up Airbnb experiences, and I'm just like, okay, like I can cobble shoes with a dude from Taiwan, like let's do it, and it's
That's
like 20
awesome.
bucks, and you come home with a shoe. So anyways, I think like that's the most important thing. Like everybody can make a difference in the world by just gaining empathy.
Yeah. Oh, completely. And I think you're right. There's not enough of that. We are very low on empathy lately. The way I look at that is that if we just could respect each other's ways of
Yeah.
life, whatever
Yeah.
they are,
Sure.
then we'd be in a better place. So it's kind of the similar parallel conversation. And I think empathy is a really, really good way to put it.
Yeah. And I think, I think a lot of people find themselves wondering, what can I do? I see the craziness, right? I see the wildness. I think the average person is like, what do I do? Like when you go to an aquarium and they make you feel guilty about all the fish being killed and poached, and you're like, well, I don't poach. How can I fix it? Yeah. And I think that like, that's kind of what I've learned is just when you have a chance, try to like, just, hear a perspective of somebody that, just travel travel and learn and try to like, just talk to people, gain that empathy, learn what people are going through that you've never even thought about. And I think that everybody can do that. Everybody has a neighbor they've never talked to and understood. And I think like that is like, when you see all the craziness, like that's the solution.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. In fact, I'm going to parallel something that was on another episode I did. She's a chronic pain sufferer. I have people in my life that have chronic pain, and I don't have chronic pain. So I don't understand what it's about. And when somebody says, this hurts the 1,000th time, it's like, oh, is that still, it's hard to continue to have the same level of sympathy and even empathy for somebody when they've had a consistent thing. Cause I don't know what that's like. I cannot understand it. And so I asked her, like, what could I do as someone who loves someone very much, who suffers with chronic pain? And she said, just ask, like, is there anything I can do to support you?
Mm-hmm.
And that line has really stuck with me. And I think it applies here.
Absolutely.
So if I could just, in conversations with people I meet, get to know my neighbor, people when I travel, if I see an opportunity and I have the ability to ask, is there anything I can do to support you? I think if we could all take that on, that would make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And you reminded me of something. When I was student body president of my high school, there was an impeachment campaign, no joke, because people were like not happy with me. I don't know, it's so stupid.
Oh my goodness.
I don't remember. I didn't plan to dance well or something. I don't know. And something so petty, but like I was so discouraged, and I would talk to my mom every day when I got home, and I was like, I'm like, what do they want from me? I don't know how. And I think I said something like I don't feel like I can change the world. Like, who am I? Like, I can't do anything, And I remember like I woke up the next day and I had a sticky note on my mirror, until I got out of the shower, and my mom had written it, and it said, you may not be able to change the world, but you can always change one person's day in this world. And that has been kind of my mantra. So anyways, I think that's kind of like the point, that we've all been talking about is just that's been my interesting journey of trying to figure out how can I do that still. It's been a weird journey of self-discovery, but yeah, thanks. This has been awesome.
I've had so much fun talking to you. I really love your perspective on things because I know it all comes from a really vulnerable and authentic place of I've been through this and this is what I've gotten from it. Like you have lived your life, not sat back and waited for life to show up. And I really acknowledge you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, I always turn the tables and see if you have a question for me. So do you have a question you'd like to ask me before we wrap up?
Yeah, tell me a little bit about, I'm just curious what your main business is, that residual income. Like, what is it? Is it essential oils? Is it something like that? Like, I'm just curious.
It's not essential oils. So it's actually the shopping annuity. And what we do is we teach people how to transfer their own personal buying habits to a
Mm-hmm.
tracking system that allows them to get credit for their purchases. So if you go and like earn money and then you go and buy stuff, you got to go back and earn more money unless you have passive income so you can buy more stuff, right?
Right.
Everybody in line, from the person who made the product to the person who handed it to you and said, here's your change, they all got a piece, however small, of that purchase price. But all you got for your purchase was the privilege of having the product or service, which these days runs out, breaks, the subscription runs out. And so this way you get credit for your purchase power. But the other cool thing is that it is a tracking system that connects you to other consumers. So we all don't just get credit for our own purchases, we get credit for the purchases of everybody we're connected to. So now I have residual income based on the buying power of a lot of people and not just my own. And
Wow.
it's really fantastic.
That's like one of the coolest concepts I've ever heard. That's awesome.
Oh,
very cool.
I didn't invent it. It's called the unfranchise. So I'm an unfranchise owner with the company. And it's a powerful concept. And
That's
during
awesome.
the pandemic, that's what I've been doing. A lot of people are looking for new and interesting ways to make money from home online. And, similar to you, somebody figured out a system, how it could work, did all the hard work, figured out the sourcing and here's a piece of fun trivia. So, Amazon got famous originally because of the one cart concept where you could go and buy 50 things from all different companies and somehow magically you pay one company and everything shows up at your house. We own that technology. We own the patent. And Amazon and other companies license it from us.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
I didn't know that. No, I've learned a bunch today too. That's awesome.
How about that? It's good. It's good. Yeah, I've learned a lot today. I've had so much fun. I'm going to let you guys go and do whatever you do at night in Taiwan.
Night markets. Lots of food.
Night markets. Awesome. Well, enjoy it. And thank you so much again for being on, and enjoy the rest of your trip and have a safe travels home.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Trista's Plate Story Podcast. Please subscribe to Trista's Plate Story Podcast to get the story behind all those vanity plates driving with you on the road. And if you would like to nominate the owner of a license plate, including you, or visit any of our partners and sponsors, come and see us at platestory.com. That's PL8STORY.com and give us the details. If you enjoyed this episode, please drop a review and give us a share. I'm Trista Polo, wishing you well on the road to your next adventure.